Hi, so I just had my shower and I'm experiencing this sort of post shower rejuvenation of mine, as I call it, and I'm feeling refreshed. And now I want to talk about Dune by Frank Herbert. And this was one of the books that I really wanted to read for a long time, and I finally have read it last year. Last year is in 2021, and I enjoyed it very, very much as I anticipated that would happen. And yeah, actually, I'm kind of intimidated by this length of this book. The copy that I have is actually a mass market paperback, and maybe that explains why it looks a little bit thicker than usual. But it is considered to be quite a big book, and I know that quite a lot of people out there who are interested in reading this book but are somewhat intimidated by its length as well, because I know I was intimidated by the length as well. But remember, if sluggish reader can finish this, so can you. And I am so confident of that. Do not be afraid of this book, because fear is the mind killer. So seamless. Anyway, forget about that. Ignore that. Anyway, back to this book. I actually saw the movie first. When the movie came out, at the same time, I visited the bookstore and I saw that this book was on sale. I think partly because of the sort of like a cross promotion with the movie. I wanted to buy this book, and I thought to myself, maybe I should read this book first before watching the movie. But then the movie was already out, and usually movies would stay about 2 to 3 weeks if it's a big movie here in Malaysia. And I don't think that I'll be able to finish this big book in 2 to 3 weeks. So I decided to go to see the movie first. And I thought that the story was so lovely, the visuals were so wonderfully done, and overall, it was just a wonderful experience, lovely narrative, and I thought, you know what, that really reinforced my interest in reading this book, and so I got this book right away afterwards, and I just read it. And yeah, like I said earlier, it was wonderful, and I'm going to talk about why. But before that, what is this book about? So we kind of have like separate threads, when we want to talk about this book. So the book actually takes place somewhere in this kind of like far future setting in space. This book is kind of like a sci-fi, space opera. So society at that time, we have like a bunch of different houses of rulers, and the society is sort of like a kind of like a feudalistic society that takes place in space. So we have different planets being ruled by different houses, and there's one emperor that rules over everybody. And we have this one particular planet that is going to be really special in this book. It's called Arrakis. So Arrakis is a desert planet. It's all sand. It's really hot. It's just like our desert. And so water is quite scarce in Arrakis. That is like one important feature of that planet. At least in this book, water is a very precious commodity in that planet. But not only that, there is also another thing that is quite precious in that planet, and that is this substance called spice. And apparently everyone wants spice, all the other planets, all the other foreign powers want spice, because spice is just so awesome. Spice can enhance interstellar travel. Spice can also prolong one's life. And apparently spice is also kind of like a psychedelic drug that people can get addicted to. And it appears that many people in this universe already sort of get themselves addicted to spice, and so there's always demand for spice, and that means anyone who can control the production of spice, the extraction of spice, is going to be like super rich. So everyone wants it. and and therefore Arrakis has been under the control of foreign powers for a long time already. And because of this kind of situation, the natives of Arrakis, called the Fremens, they are kind of they have been exploited by these foreign powers. And coupled with the fact that their lives have been kind of harsh due to the natural condition of Arrakis, the water scarcity, we have a bunch of really angry native people, who are just really, who have been facing like tons of injustice from other people. So that's one thing that is going to be really important in this book. Now, on another thread, we also have, that will be the introduction of our main character. His name is Paul. So Paul is actually the son of a duke of one particular house. It is called House of Atreides, and they actually lived in Caladan. And one day, the emperor decides to get House of Atreides to take over the production of spies in Arrakis, and so the emperor orders the House of Atreides to relocate to Arrakis in order to do that. But the emperor actually is plotting something sinister with another rival house. They are plotting something evil, and even though House of Atreides, the Duke of the House of Atreides, knows that what is possibly going on, there is possibly a trap, they go along with it, and they end up getting destroyed. House of Atreides is no more, but they are survivors. Paul and his mom survives the attack, and because when they survive the attack, they are already in Arrakis. Through some kind of clever manipulation, Paul and his mom are able to live among the Fremen, and from there they sort of begins to plot kind of like how they want to seek revenge, avenge the fall of their house. And at the same time, the Fremens are all happy to help because, again, the Fremens have always been subject to oppression and exploitation for a long time already. And so yeah, the story kind of takes off from there. It's a really interesting story with so many different characters sort of planning and plotting and scheming, and it's really very plot heavy. It's very fast paced as well when it talks about the events that unfold as you read this novel. So one reason why I liked it is, of course, because I think that the plot is really wonderfully woven. It's fast paced, and new things are constantly happening, and kind of like new intrigue is sort of you sort of see new intrigues being planned and hatched by different characters in this book. It's all very gripping, so that's really exciting. Another thing that I really like about this book is how, and I think I would say that I would like this aspect even more than the plot, is that the subjects that the book explores. I think it's really wonderful because the first time I was exposed to this narrative was actually from the movie, and I thought it was quite political. And it was indeed very political, the book as well. It talks about the effects of colonization and also controlling a group of people, having a much powerful kind of a powerful party, like for example a powerful ruler from a different country controlling a group of people from a different country, and the effects that it has on the people that is being conquered. And the exploitation of people, the inhumanity of it is just it's wonderfully explored in this story. And at the same time, because most of the time this kinds of conquest is motivated by motivated by greed, and also motivated by this constant want of particular resource. Like even in our real life, people are fighting over resources, and this is very much relevant in this book, where everyone wants to fight over the control of spice, and that sort of intersects with with a different side of things, the environmental side of things. Like, okay, it's one thing to want to extract resources and use it to gain profit, and in the process oppressing the native people who live near the resources. That's one thing. Another thing is that while extracting particular resources, what are we doing to the environment, and what is the effect that we could possibly introduce to the environment in our efforts to plunder the natural resources. So that's another thing, and so now we kind of have like two aspects that sort of sound like they are not really linked together, but actually the environmental aspect and also the native people aspect, those two are also linked with one another. So we kind of have this triangular relationship in which we are screwing up the environment, and at the same time we're screwing over the people. And what about the relationship between the people and the environment? By screwing up the environment, we're screwing over the people as well. We're sort of destroying the environment in which the people live. So that's another thing, and it actually gets even more complicated than that, the way that I express it in here. So it's all really fascinating. Really loves the kind of like the intersectionality of these different subjects, and how it is sort of woven into this like really lovely story about people scheming against one another, and also a story of revenge, by the way. So yeah, that's wonderful. The book is really political. I really love that aspect of it. On to the writing of this book. Okay, I think a lot of people based on some reviews that I've seen, many would say that the writing in this book would probably not qualify as the most literary kind of writing, which, okay, whatever. But I think that the writing, for me, it comes across as very honest. It comes across as very passionate. Sounds like it's a story that is being told by someone who really wants to tell the story about this guy whose home and whose sort of country, so to speak, is being destroyed by a different party, and he just wants to get revenge. So it's a very straightforward story, to be honest, but the way that the narrator tells it is just so you can really feel the zeal in the storytelling. You can really feel that the narrator does not care about the kinds of language that they use. It seems, I think the writer probably cares about that, but it sounds like they are not trying too hard to make their writing flowery, and instead the focus is put much more on the storytelling, which I think is it makes the book sounds really sincere, and when you read it you feel like this is a wonderful story and I'm really enjoying this story, because you can focus more on the story without really having to bother yourself with the extra things, really analyzing the writing as you read, so sort of a thing. And so that's one thing. The writing is very it's very simple, I would say. It's not difficult to read. It doesn't try to be flowery. That's important. And as a result, you get the story in its almost raw form. Yeah. So that's one thing. Another thing that I find really consistent in this book is there's one feature that I find it to be quite interesting, and I must say this feature sort of makes this book feel a little bit more flamboyant. And I'll probably talk about the flamboyant part of this book, starting from now. So reading this book, often you'll be treated with long sentences, or even paragraphs, entire paragraphs of the internal monologues of the characters. And I would say most of the important characters, nearly all of the important characters, I would say, in this book would get that moment in which, we are reading this book, we're reading the story, we're seeing the events, the actions unfold, and then suddenly the pacing would sort of comes to a halt, slows down a little bit, because now we reach this paragraph or a long sentence in which we listen to what this character is really thinking about inside their head. And those portions are written in italics. And those portions are peppered throughout this book. It's really consistent. Every single chapter would have that kind of section, that italic section where we hear what the characters are really thinking. And I feel that it is done in such a... If it's done in a, in a kind of like a scarce way, like if it's not peppered throughout the book, I would say that would comes across as quite clunky. It's sort of weird, but because it happens so much, we have this really fast-paced story, and then suddenly we become slow, and then we get back to the action, it becomes fast again, and we get to this internal monologue portion, and it becomes slow again. I find it really interesting. And, because I visualize when I read, this actually reminds me of one thing. It reminds me of soap opera, especially the South American soap opera that I didn't watch them religiously when I was younger, but back then when I was young in Malaysia, these television shows are syndicated over here as well, and they were quite popular, and so many people would watch them at 2 to 3 p.m. So I am sort of familiar with the kinds of pacing that you could find in these kinds of soap opera. But not only that, some Asian soap operas would also have this kind of pacing, because soap operas are usually fast-paced. They are mostly just actions happening, people scheming against one another, plotting against one another, and there will always be something new developing in each episode, and each episode would end in cliffhangers. And there will be moments in soap operas in which the character would, the camera would zoom into their face, and there would be a voiceover talking about what the character, showing what the character is thinking about. And that, reading that in Dune reminds me of those moments in soap opera. And when I really think about it, this entire book really feels like soap opera. And from the way that the story is about people, people plotting, scheming, characters, to the pacing of this book, to that whole internal monologues thing, and also the villain of Dune is this this one guy named Baron Harkonnen. He is just so evil in the most evil and vilest way. Like, he's just evil without redemption qualities. And he sort of reminds me of those like really flamboyant evil kind of old crone characters in soap operas who are always plotting something evil in the background. Baron Harkonnen reminds me of those female characters in soap operas. And I think that there are so much parallels between Dune and a soap opera, daytime soap opera. So yeah, that's my impression of this book, and as a result I find that Dune to be somewhat of a flamboyant, it is quite campy book. I would consider this book to be quite campy, and I really love it because it sets this like really interesting tone into, you know, this whole novel. And here I am, you know, I thought that this book was going to be like really serious and philosophical, and it was philosophical, but it is, you know, I thought it was going to be philosophical in this sort of serious and stoic and very testosterone charged book. But the way it the way it came across to me when I was reading, I thought that it was kind of over the top. I think many characters are acting dramatically. The protagonists, the supporting characters, the villains especially are so dramatic. You know, they are the kinds of characters who would smile and laugh while they're doing evil stuff. Like literally, it is being portrayed in here that they actually smile while, you know, seeing some vile things being done. So yeah, this book is also very dramatic. So if you're into that kind of writing, try it. And and this book sort of makes me realize that one thing that I really treasure in the book, you know, one thing that allows me to say a book is really wonderful is the voice. It sort of opens my eye to that. I've never been able to articulate why I like certain books before, but I would say voice is really important. Even though this book is, you know, not my usual literary fiction fare, I sort of travels outside my comfort zone by reading this book. It has a wonderful voice, and as a result, I loved it. And when I think about the other books that I've read before, those books have wonderful, unique voice that just pretty much resonates with me as well. So voice is really important. Dune made me realize that. So yeah, that's it. I guess, you know, all of the things that I love about Dune so far. I might have other things that I love about Dune as well, but these are the most important things. So let me know if you have read this book and if you've liked it, or if you disliked it, what you think about it, or if you want to read this book, or if you are afraid to read this book. Remember the Bene Gesserit litany that I mentioned earlier. I'm not going to mention it again because that would make me sound really dramatic. So anyway, I am going to end this video now, and I'll see you again in a different one. So until then, take care, thanks for watching, and bye bye.